Bien, bienvenidos. Para los que no
Welcome. I'm Juan Michelini, and I'm Maximiliano Garnet, and we work in the research and development team of GeneXus. And today we want to tell you about design systems and how to make them vibrate with GeneXus. So what's a design system? It's a set of practices, patterns, and principles to make sure that our applications are designed in the right manner. But I prefer to show you a synthesis. This is what we see when we look at a design system: colors, controls, margins. This is also something we see. It's a series of options that we can use to design, a series of blocks, or something like this. So instead of a designed application, we see forms to design an application. So the designer does not show the end result. He's showing how he's going to make the application, and this allows for better unification. So it's the systematization of a design. It's not it's like a Lego game which is put together in order to get an end result. And why is this happening now? I don't know whether you can read the screen. It says that the design has become strategic. There are many chapters in this publication speaking about design system, and I have highlighted a couple of things. I won't explain design system academically as this book, but I will explain the current situation. The applications used to be in the desktop. You would say, I want to carry out this task. You will go to your desktop and do it. The desktop is a place where you concentrate when you have a goal, something to do. But now the applications are apps, and they are contained in this device, and they end up on the bus or on the kitchen table, or in situations in which your attention is divided among many contexts, and you have to decide where or in which you put your full attention. In the past, the design was not so important because the user would concentrate until he or she achieved the purpose for which he was working. But now, if the concentration is not so easy to achieve, then the user abandons the task. And also, design is about trust. Now, the applications are in charge of almost everything, and we have seen it in Airbnb. In the application, there's someone's home that is offered. It's not necessarily a chain of hotels. So it is very clear that if the user trusts the site, he will take the lodging that is offered or not. Trust is much more liquid than before because the person with whom we make a contract changes in Airbnb, and it will depend on what Airbnb does. And the company has not been designed by designers, but every time they faced an issue, they changed the design and got away with it, and they managed to solve the problem. And they have research and development departments in some companies, in that company, in order to solve problems. In New York, for example, there were many apartments to rent at a certain point, and they were not making deals. So they adjusted the user's experience. They changed the way in which they presented the apartments. They changed the photos. Well, they became the company they're now, while they were almost bankrupt at the time. Now, this is okay as a motivational example, but what is a design system? It's composed by atoms and molecules. And what is clear is that in GeneXus we use these terms, using user controls and stencils. Uh, these terms have been taken, atoms and molecules, from Airbnb. For example, we see a text, an image, some things that allow us to express what we were unable to express in the past. Those are atoms, but molecules are a combination with a title, subtitle, and an image. And this is a set that I'm going to use in many situations. In GeneXus, in order to introduce new atoms, we introduce user controls, and to combine molecules, we use stencils. The user controls, well, we have HTML, JavaScript, SES, and we have a designer that knows about front end, or we take it from material design, or from a HESIC, or from another institution, and we introduce a new atom in GeneXus. Here we have something that is atomic. It has an image and text, but I can only see the content. I don't move the text upwards. And very quickly, we introduce GeneXus with user control. A different case is when you have a molecule. For example, I had an atom which was an image, another one which was a text, and I built a logo or a text. In this case, to describe or to create a coin, I have the coin and I want to use it in many screens. And it's going to be the same kind of design, the same margin. It's going to be one next to the other. We can define it as a stencil and reuse it in each panel. And in this way, if we make a change here, it spreads to the others. In design system, we also have tokens, which are properties. Token is a color, a kind of letter, a dimension in the square, in the image, a width, a margin. These are properties that are cross-cutting to the control of the molecule that is being used at the moment. We could express tokens already and combinations of tokens. In GeneXus, we have themes and palettes, and also with stencils and user controls, we have all the pieces to make a design system. But everything is interconnected, and that is why we are introducing the design system object. As Juan said, in GeneXus, we were already developing a series of elements, design elements that were separated until now. There wasn't any object to centralize all this. We had the classes, the colors, etc. But now we are defining an object that centralizes all this. And the design systems try to facilitate going from a design to our functional application. So, what does this object have, and what are we doing in it? It is divided into three parts. You have the token, the styles, and the elements. Now, I'll tell you about each one of these parts, starting with the tokens. This is a technical definition. A token is the most basic element of a design system. The designer sends options. For example, if we had colors, what we have nowadays is a palette of colors, and each one is an option I have for the design. I am going to choose what I put into my system. So to establish a parallelism, we have a colors palette and the tokens. This is how the tokens are seen in GeneXus at the moment. We have a section which is text, and I write here it's a language similar to CCS, and we have certain tags, as you see on the left, where certain sets are defined, and there I can put tokens. In this case, I have colors that replace the palette and borders. So among the colors, I can choose whether I want to have the fine border with 2 pixels or no border at all. We can also choose fonts and spaces, among other features. And I'll show you an example. Let's assume we have this layout. A designer sends us this and they say we want to fill in these boxes, and the space between each one is 12 pixels. So we add classes into this box, and depending on the side we add the 12 pixels. But we have a problem with this. Nothing establishes the 12 pixels in the margins from the 12 pixels in the font. 12 pixels is a value and they coincide, so the value is the same, but from a conceptual point of view they are different. It's not the same thing, a margin than a font. And in this style page we have no way of making the difference. But what if they tell us we have to change the margins to 15 pixels? The property says it's one is margin, the other one is font, but we don't know whether the font remains the same or not. Or maybe I will change everything to 15 by mistake. So conceptually, nothing tells me that these 12 means something. That's a problem. And on the other hand, I may want to change again back to 15, to 12. So I put 15 here, and I have been able to do what the designer asked for, but this can be even more than 3 steps, which is the case here. For those who have used classes, you have seen that it takes a lot of measures and of changes. And now what can we do with the design system? We solve the problems. Firstly, on the left, we are going to define a collection of tokens, and here we are giving a concept to this 12. The one on top is the 12 of the spaces, and the other one is the 12 that concerns the font size. So if they tell me change the spaces to 15, I'm not going to mistake them for the font. It's explicit in what I wrote that the spaces are different from the font. Then in my style page, I don't write values. I establish certain points for the tokens. So there is a reference to the concepts. When I look at the style page, I know and I can read the difference between the margins and the fonts. And on the other hand, when I want to solve the question of 12 and 15, I change the token and I just start the token, and the change spreads to the rest of the system. And this is for the web panel and any other place where I have a reference to these classes of my design system. So in this demo, you will see how we do it in GeneXus. The tokens seem to be very important because they allow us to document in codes. And it's a relief when you work with codes. I am doing a design and I pass it on to Maxi, and if I pass it on with tokens, he can know what my intention was and he can work faster than if I just pass on numbers and he has to guess what I wanted to do. So in the demo, we are going to show you what we have in the editor. On the left, we have the textual editor, and on the right-hand side, a visual editor. They both work jointly. If I modify the text, the visual part is going to be modified. We change the base color and we put it in red, and here it becomes red. Is it done automatically? They communicate with each other. We've done it from textual to visual, and we can also modify the visual in some other way. and have an impact on the text. The colors are already in the palette, but we can also change the spaces. But it's incorrect. It doesn't coincide with the list, so we're going to change it to 5, and we'll see immediately how the spaces decrease when we make the change. So this is with the tokens to show you very quickly. The language is very similar to CCS, and we have these various options. Now going back to the PDTs, so as you see in this PPT, the second option is the styles. Based on these options, I can make decisions and combine what I have is what we have nowadays with the classes. Let's say that for this control, I want round borders and green background. So I press the button and the decision is implemented. So basically here we have what we had in the theme and the classes, but now with a textual language. This language is very similar to CCS and it's compatible with CCS. And there are 3 ways of setting up this style page. I do a copy paste with a CCS and I have all the classes that can be defined in the CCS without having to do anything else. The second possibility is what we have here. It's a kind of hybrid. I have the CCS, I copy and paste it, and the relevant tokens change and I tokenize this page. So there is a reference to the tokens that were defined in the previous page, and I have a hybrid page. And finally, the one that is more purist, the whole page is tokenized. This is the direction in which the world is going. And if you look for tokens online, people are moving in that direction. There are many philosophies, but there's no language which says this is how token pages will be defined. So we had to define our own. And in a demo, we'll show you how they interact, what's the interaction between the tokens and how they can be seen in the application. We go back to GeneXus and we have the styles where we have defined different classes. Some of them have parameters, others don't. And we're going to change one of the classes in the tokens. We go to the tokens, change the colors, and I'm going to change the color as I did before. Let's show you the side first. These are the colors, and this is the side. Our side is in red. We had already changed it to red, and we have the bottoms in red, the separating line. We want to change the color everywhere, so we go to GeneXus, we change the token from red to the color that design asked for, and here we have a change that has impacted everything, and we don't even need to do a build. Just by saving the object, it is caught by the navigator, by the browser. So I refresh and the color changes. So it's much easier than going through each one of the classes to change the color. So we want to change the borders now. The process is similar. We had 5 pixels border and we are going to change the number of pixels. We refresh, we save it, we refresh, and the border now has 1 pixel. So the place where we had this reference will show 1 pixel. Imagine now that we want to change the font. In the style page, it's now tokenized. It's written. So it's the number one problem we mentioned. In each one of these places, you have to put the new font. So we are going to change so that the font is tokenized. We go to the token, we modify the value, and once again everything is integrated. The problem we have here is that we have to decide in each case whether this is the font that we wanted to change or not, because we didn't have a token, so we have to decide whether it represents a token or not. So it seems easy, but it's not, because it may be the font that had to be used, and now we want to divide it, and we need one for the titles and the other one for the paragraph. So we don't know whether this font is actually the one the designer wanted me to change. Maybe I didn't have to change it in the title, or maybe the font was representing something from another screen. That's because we don't have it as a token. Now we change the object and we go to the web panel. It's a subtle change, but I don't know, and so I don't know whether you've noticed it. But believe me, the font has changed it. We went step by step so that you would see the difference between modifying a token, which takes 1 second, and modifying each one of the fonts. The change is subtle for us programmers, but for the designers, well, we don't know. Since we have to make the change and then verify whether we made it correctly or not having a design system complicates things, because maybe we have forgotten something and then it's a problem for the design. But if we respect the tokens that we were given by design, it's much easier. And the third part of the design system is the elements. The tokens were options, the styles were decisions, and the elements are controls. Nowadays, GeneXus has some predefined controls that are added to the web panel, like a button or a grid. In these elements, these controls, we add more power in the design system. On the one hand, the default rule, which associates one type of control, for example, button, with a user control, button combo. And as Juan said, we have the object user control, where you can write how you want your control to be. If you say this is a button control, then I can add it here in this default rule, which changes all the default buttons in my web panel. If in the past GeneXus put a button which I was unable to modify, now I am saying, with this button, write down this HTML, this code, and this HTML will be generated as I want. And then there is another rule, define. Define allows me to create new controls. I create new controls with design decisions that I have already made. The classical one is the insert button. In every screen, the insert button seems the same, but if I have 10 web panels and I have to put in the button in each one, and also the class to the button, with this rule, what we do is we define, for example, a small button, and I add this class. So in the web panel, I add an insert button. So I add the button with the control and the design decision already made. We'll show you how we are doing it in GeneXus. Firstly, we'll see how GeneXus is generating in my web panel at the moment a button. We're going to inspect the button, and we're going to inspect the HTML. This is how it should look. Oh, it's a build. And for this part, we do need a build, because what we are doing is is to change the way in which GeneXus generates this button. The web panel is generated again. We refresh and see how GeneXus by default puts in the button. So it's an input, which is that button, and it adds a lot of properties that are put by GeneXus, and there's nothing I can do in this regard. But I want this tag to be a button, so I define my user control. The user control says that it's a button. The tag is button of the and the kind is button, and I add it in the elements, and I add the rule default. So this is going to change all of the buttons. I'm going to tell GeneXus which one is the default. It adds the rule, we generate again, and we are going to see what we had at the beginning, the button as I wanted it. In the user control, we can write whatever we want. So we can add here that all the buttons by default have a certain class. So let's say that we want them to be round or oval. With the user control, we can do it. We add the class of button we want. And we add it to the class that is put in the control when I put it in the web panel. We generate again. We are going to see what it's generating, and it's going to impact all of the buttons. Now we see the difference clearly. All of the buttons will be round. The define rule has not been implemented yet, but everything you see here is in the beta version. And the idea we want to convey is that the design system object is being developed as we speak, and there are many design components that we had and we are using, but we want to go one step further. We believe that the design systems should also interact with the patterns. We have not implemented this yet, but we are going in this direction, and all the things that are still missing in these objects are going to be included. Theme and class are going to converge in design system, and in these objects we are going to see that these objects are much more integrated.